It was the summer of 2009, a season that seemed unremarkable at first glance in the small town of Maplewood, Ohio. Nestled along the banks of the sluggish Cuyahoga River, Maplewood was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and the biggest news story of the year might be about a runaway dog or a particularly bad storm. The town itself had a population of just over 5,000 people, most of whom were connected by generations of shared history. It was quiet, predictable, and safe, or so everyone thought. The story begins with a man named John Miller, a retired schoolteacher who spent his days tinkering in his garage workshop or volunteering at the local library. John wasn't one for gossip or superstition, but he had always been fascinated by old photographs. He collected them whenever he could find them. Yellowed snapshots tucked into thrift store albums, dusty frames abandoned at estate sales, anything that hinted at the lives of people long gone. To him, these images were windows into another time, fragments of stories waiting to be pieced together. One humid afternoon in late July, John stumbled upon something unusual at the Maplewood Flea Market, a weekly gathering held in the parking lot of the old high school stadium. Amidst the usual clutter of second-hand books, mismatched furniture, and hand-knitted scarves, he spotted a cardboard box filled with old photographs. Most were faded and cracked, showing smiling families, solemn wedding parties, or candid shots of children playing. But one photo caught his eye immediately, not because of its subject, but because of its eerie quality. The photograph was black and white, slightly blurred around the edges, as though it had been taken hastily. It showed a group of 6 people standing on what appeared to be a wooden dock jutting out into a lake. They were dressed casually, their clothes suggesting the late 1970s or early 1980s. 3 men and 3 women, all appearing to be in their 20s or 30s, smiled awkwardly at the camera. Behind them, the water shimmered under the sun, and the trees lining the shore swayed gently in the breeze. At first glance, it looked like any other vintage photo, the kind you'd expect to see hanging on the wall of a diner or tucked away in an attic. But something about it unsettled John. Maybe it was the way the figures seemed to blend into the background, almost ghostly in their lack of detail. Or maybe it was the faint shadow looming behind them, darker and larger than it should have been. Whatever it was, John couldn't shake the feeling that the photo carried a weight far heavier than its simple appearance suggested. He purchased the photograph for $2 from the vendor, an elderly woman who claimed she'd found it among her late husband's belongings. "I don't know who they are," she admitted with a shrug. "Never seen them before." Back home, John placed the photo on his dining room table and studied it carefully. As he did, he noticed something strange. None of the faces were clear enough to identify. Their features were smudged, distorted, as if someone had rubbed a damp cloth across the surface after the image was developed. Despite this, there was no damage to the rest of the photo. The background remained sharp and vivid. It was as though the people themselves didn't want to be seen. Curiosity got the better of him, and John decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, he visited the local historical society, flipping through archived newspapers and yearbooks in search of clues. He also posted a scanned copy of the photo online, asking if anyone recognized the individuals or the location. Responses trickled in slowly, but none provided concrete answers. Some commenters suggested the photo might have been taken at Clearwater Lake, a popular recreation spot about 20 miles outside of Maplewood. Others dismissed it as nothing more than a random snapshot, unworthy of attention. Then one evening, a message appeared in his inbox. It was from a user named Oldtimer43, whose profile picture showed a weathered face beneath a baseball cap. The message read, "I recognize this place. That's Clearwater Lake, all right. And those people, well, I can't say for sure who they are, but I do remember hearing about a tragedy there years ago. 6 young adults disappeared within a year of each other. No one ever figured out why. John's stomach churned as he reread the message several times. Disappeared? What did that mean? He replied, asking for more details, but Oldtimer 43 never responded again. Frustrated yet intrigued, John continued his investigation, determined to uncover the truth. His breakthrough came a week later, when he received a phone call from a woman named Margaret Hayes. She introduced herself as a former resident of Maplewood who now lived in Cleveland. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had seen the photo online and recognized one of the figures, her older brother, Daniel. Daniel went missing in 1983, Margaret said, her words heavy with emotion. He was last seen near Clearwater Lake. We searched everywhere, but we never found him. The police said he probably drowned, but I don't think that's what happened. She went on to explain that Daniel had been part of a tight-knit group of friends who often spent weekends camping and fishing at the lake. After his disappearance, the others began vanishing one by one, each death occurring under mysterious circumstances. One drowned while swimming alone. Another died in a car accident on a deserted road. A third succumbed to an unknown illness despite showing no prior symptoms. By the end of 1984, all 6 were gone. Margaret sent John copies of newspaper clippings from the era, along with personal letters and journal entries written by Daniel. As John pored over the materials, a chilling pattern emerged. Each victim had reported strange occurrences leading up to their deaths. Unexplained noises in the night, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, dreams filled with ominous warnings. Some even claimed to hear whispers calling their names, urging them to return to the lake. The final piece of evidence came in the form of a letter written by Daniel shortly before his disappearance. Addressed to his sister, it contained a single sentence scrawled in shaky handwriting. "If you find this, tell Mom and Dad I'm sorry. Something is following me." John felt a chill run down his spine as he read the words. He realized then that the photograph wasn't just a relic of the past, it was a harbinger of doom. Whoever had taken it had captured not only the faces of 6 doomed individuals, but also the malevolent force that haunted them. Determined to put the mystery to rest, John decided to visit Clearwater Lake himself. On a gray October morning, he drove out to the secluded body of water, leaving behind the comfort of Maplewood for the eerie stillness of the wilderness. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The lake stretched out before him like a sheet of glass, reflecting the overcast sky. As he approached the dilapidated dock shown in the photograph, John felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The whispers started almost immediately soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to emanate from the trees surrounding the lake. He tried to ignore them, focusing instead on examining the area for any signs of disturbance. But the closer he got to the dock, the louder the voices became, until they were practically screaming in his ears. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, hovering above the water. It was tall and gaunt, its shape shifting unnaturally as it moved toward him. Its face, if it could be called that, was a blur of darkness, devoid of features yet somehow expressive in its malice. John stumbled backward, dropping the photograph in his haste to retreat. The figure stopped abruptly, tilting its head as if studying him. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, reaching out with elongated arms that seemed impossibly long. John screamed, scrambling to his feet and running blindly through the woods. Branches clawed at his skin, and roots tripped him repeatedly. But he didn't stop until he reached his car. Breathless and shaking, he sped away from the lake, glancing repeatedly in his rearview mirror to ensure the creature wasn't following him. When he finally arrived home, he locked every door and window, barricading himself inside. For hours, he sat in silence, clutching a flashlight and listening intently for any sign of movement. Days passed, then weeks, and nothing further happened. The whispers ceased, and the figure never reappeared. Relieved but still deeply unsettled, John resolved to destroy the photograph. He burned it in his backyard, watching as the flames consumed the haunting image and reduced it to ashes. But the relief was short-lived. One night, as he lay in bed trying to sleep, he heard a soft tapping at his window. Against his better judgment, he rose to investigate. Pulling back the curtain, he froze in terror. There, staring back at him from the other side of the glass, was the same shadowy figure from the lake. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it spoke in a voice that sounded like a chorus of whispers layered atop one another. "You shouldn't have meddled." Before John could react, the window shattered inward, shards of glass raining down on him. He fell to the floor, shielding his face with his arms, and when he looked up again, the room was empty. Yet the whispers remained, echoing endlessly in his mind. In the days that followed, John withdrew from public life, refusing to leave his house or speak to anyone. Neighbors grew concerned when they saw lights burning in his windows at all hours of the night. Finally, unable to bear the isolation any longer, they called the authorities. When police entered the house, they found no trace of John Miller. His belongings were untouched, his car parked neatly in the driveway. The only clue was a fresh set of muddy footprints leading from his bedroom to the front door, and a single Polaroid photograph lying on the kitchen table. The photo showed John standing on the dock at Clearwater Lake, surrounded by the same 6 figures from the original image. Their faces were still obscured, but their expressions radiated unmistakable malice. Behind them loomed the shadowy figure, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. On the back of the photograph, written in shaky handwriting, were 4 words. "Why did you look?" The discovery of John Miller's disappearance sent shockwaves through Maplewood. The town, once known for its quiet predictability, now buzzed with whispered conversations and uneasy glances. Neighbors who had known John for decades struggled to reconcile the calm, curious man they remembered with the chilling circumstances surrounding his vanishing. The Polaroid photograph found on his kitchen table was confiscated by the police, but quickly became the subject of local legend. Copies of it circulated online, each grainy scan accompanied by increasingly wild theories about curses, spirits, and supernatural forces tied to Clearwater Lake. Despite the mounting fear, one person refused to let the mystery rest. Margaret Hayes, Daniel's sister. Having already lost her brother and his friends decades earlier, she felt a deep responsibility to uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for everyone whose lives had been touched by the tragedy. She reached out to John's family, offering condolences while gently pressing them for information about his investigation. From fragments of notes and files left behind in John's home office, she pieced together his research, retracing his steps to Clearwater Lake and beyond. Margaret's determination led her to an elderly woman named Evelyn Carter, a retired librarian who had lived near Clearwater Lake during the 1980s. Evelyn was frail and hard of hearing, but her memory remained sharp. When Margaret showed her the original photograph that had started it all, Evelyn's face turned pale, and she began trembling uncontrollably. "That dock," Evelyn whispered, pointing a shaky finger at the image. "It wasn't always there." Confused, Margaret leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Evelyn explained that the wooden dock depicted in the photo hadn't existed until late 1982. Before then, the shoreline had been untouched, a pristine stretch of sand and reeds where locals occasionally fished or picnicked. The construction of the dock had been funded by a wealthy businessman named Richard Langston, who owned property along the lake. Langston had insisted on building it despite protests from some residents, claiming it would boost tourism. But shortly after its completion, strange things began happening. Pets went missing, children reported seeing shadowy figures in the woods, and several people claimed to hear disembodied voices calling their names. Richard Langston disappeared too, Evelyn added, her voice barely audible. He vanished without a trace less than a year after the dock was built. No one ever found him. Intrigued, Margaret dug deeper into Langston's history. What she uncovered was both shocking and tragic. Richard Langston hadn't simply been a businessman looking to profit off the lake. He had been deeply troubled, haunted by guilt over an accident that had occurred years earlier. According to old newspaper clippings, Langston's teenage daughter, Claire, had drowned in Clearwater Lake in 1975 after falling from a makeshift raft. Her body was never recovered, and the incident devastated the family. Friends and acquaintances recalled how Langston became obsessed with the idea of finding closure, even hiring divers to search the murky depths long after authorities had given up hope. Margaret realized then that the dock might not have been built for tourists. It was Langston's attempt to create a memorial for his daughter. But something had gone terribly wrong. Whether it was due to the location itself or some darker force awakened by the construction, the dock seemed to act as a conduit for malevolence, drawing people toward it like moths to a flame. Armed with this knowledge, Margaret decided to confront the source of the curse head-on. On a cold November morning, she drove to Clearwater Lake, carrying with her a small wooden box containing mementos of her brother Daniel, a dog-eared journal, a faded baseball cap, and a photograph of him smiling beside their childhood home. She also brought a Bible gifted to her by Pastor Lewis, the same minister who had tried to comfort her family after Daniel's disappearance. When she arrived at the dock, the air was unnaturally still, the surface of the lake smooth as glass. The whispers began almost immediately, faint at first, but growing louder as she approached. Shadows flitted between the trees, and the temperature dropped sharply, sending shivers down her spine. Summoning every ounce of courage, Margaret placed the box on the edge of the dock and opened it, revealing its contents to the empty expanse of water. "I'm here for Daniel," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "And for Claire, for everyone who's suffered because of this place." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the lake erupted into chaos. Waves surged upward, crashing against the dock with unnatural force. A figure rose from the water, its form shifting and indistinct, yet unmistakably human. It was Claire Langston, or what remained of her. Her translucent face bore an expression of anguish, her hollow eyes staring directly at Margaret. "You shouldn't have come," Claire's voice echoed, layered with countless others. "This isn't your burden to bear." Margaret took a step back, but held her ground. "I'm not leaving until you release them," she replied firmly. "Let my brother go. Let all of them go." Claire hesitated, her form flickering like a dying flame. Behind her, more figures emerged from the depths: Daniel, John, and the 6 individuals from the photograph. Their faces were blank, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they were puppets controlled by unseen strings. Margaret recognized them instantly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she called out their names. The whispers grew deafening, swirling around her like a storm. She clutched the Bible tightly, reciting prayers under her breath. To her surprise, the figures paused, their forms wavering as though weakened by her words. Seizing the opportunity, Margaret stepped forward, placing herself between the spirits and the lake. "I forgive you," she said, addressing Claire. "You didn't mean for this to happen. None of you did. But it ends now." For a moment, everything froze. The wind stopped, the waves stilled, and the whispers fell silent. Claire's expression softened, her ghostly form dissolving into mist. One by one, the other figures followed suit, their outlines fading until only empty air remained. The oppressive energy that had hung over the lake lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. Exhausted but relieved, Margaret gathered the box and walked away from the dock, leaving behind the ghosts of the past. As she drove back to Maplewood, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had done the right thing, but she also knew that some scars ran too deep to fully heal. Weeks later, life in Maplewood returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be. The story of the cursed photograph faded into local lore, retold by campfires and late-night gatherings. Margaret resumed her daily routine, though she kept a framed picture of Daniel on her mantelpiece, a reminder of the brother she had fought so hard to save. Clearwater Lake remained largely abandoned, its waters undisturbed save for the occasional fisherman or hiker. The dock, however, showed signs of decay far beyond its years, its wooden planks splintered and warped as if consumed by time itself. Eventually, the town council voted to demolish it, citing safety concerns. On the day of its destruction, no one stood nearby to watch. The whispers had ceased, and the shadows had retreated. For now. But as Margaret often reminded herself, the past has a way of lingering, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And though the curse of Clearwater Lake appeared to be broken, she couldn't help but wonder, had they truly banished the darkness, or merely pushed it deeper into the depths? Only time would tell,